Hello and welcome to this brand new show from the Comic Crush. This is a Batman-centric podcast, and I'll be joined in a moment by my co-host and creator of the show, Hemant Sheffy. As I said, Batman-centric podcast. We haven't got a title for this show yet. If you have any suggestions, please send them to us on a postcard or by social media via the modern means. But once Evan comes on, I'll give you a quick rundown of what the show is going to be about and how we're going to approach it. Hopefully, it'll be a bit different from other Batman shows that you've watched and listened to before, or it'll be exactly the same. And there's not a lot I can really do about that. But let's get my co-host on.
Sorry, I thought I made you laugh immediately.
Yeah, how you doing? You good?
I'm not bad, thanks. I'm not bad.
Good. It's good to see you. You of course came up with this little concoction of chaos that we're now entering into. So what we're going to do is each week we will pick a maximum of 2 Batman storylines to discuss on the show, and they will be themed. So if you follow us on social media at the Comic Crush on Threads and Instagram, at the comiccrush.bsky.social on Blue Sky, on Facebook, each week, once the episode's over, I'll be putting up a list of themes. But what we won't be telling you is what the books are. You'll have to tune in to find that out. You might be able to guess from some of the things what books we're going to be discussing each week. But as we talk about those books, that's it. The theme is gone. We've discussed it. It's over with. We're moving on to the next one. It's going to run for about 13 to 15 weeks. There will also be some replies episodes. So if you've got a question you want to ask us, comments on the show, please put that in the YouTube comments or on any of the socials. And every sort of 3 episodes or so, we're going to do a replies video, and we'll discuss your comments and try and answer your questions. As long as they're polite, just be polite. You can be critical, but we just ask that you be polite. And there will also be a couple of Patreon special episodes coming, which will handle some of the more controversial storylines or some of the ones that you would expect to find in the show. But we've tried to go for stuff that's unexpected to a certain degree. So you won't get year 1 in this season, unfortunately. Very sorry about that. But it has kind of been not done to death. I mean, you can never say enough good things about year 1.
I'm kind of disappointed because I've gone and bought that IDW huge article edition now. So, I mean, that was going to be the whole centerpiece of an episode. But yeah,
I can just see you lugging that. Yeah, and your face disappears. Yeah,
it is so big. It actually lives by the side here in a cardboard box because it is.
Yeah, it's just they're enormous.
That's how it lives. There's no shelf it can live on.
I don't really want any of those artist editions just because of the size. I do not have the room for them. One thing I do want to get in year 1 is the absolute year 1, which has the recolored and the original editions in, and that I'd love to get. Anyway, we're not here to talk about things we want to buy or have brought. So for this episode, the theme is beginnings. So Batman Origins, if you like. And we've chosen 2 books. Hemant, what have we chosen?
I believe you chose them actually, but it was Detective Comics 27 and Year 0.
Right. So we've gone quite a disparate gap there. So we've gone for the kind of middle ground origin of Batman from Year 0 and the original kind of very first Batman issue. We'll do them in order. I imagine we'll talk about Detective 27 first, but that is the theme of the episode, beginnings. We're going to talk about how those things connect. We're going to talk about our experience of reading them, and also just about, where they sit in the Batman kind of canon and things like that. So straight in with Detective 27.
Well, I had a question first.
Oh, go on.
I will throw random questions at you.
There'll be a podcast at the end of this, folks. Go on.
But the question for this week is: when you read Batman, do you have a specific voice in your head, whether that be an accent or an actor or what have you? When you read Batman, do you usually have a certain voice in your head?
Joe Lycett. No, I think it's weird. Like it's kind of changed. Stop it.
One of the core problems of doing a podcast with you, Paul, is we make each other laugh. So it's possible the podcast could be just laughter on the topic of that.
With any chance, the audience will be loving it too. I think so. For me, it's changed over the years. But the one I keep find myself going back to, and it's so weird, and I think it's to do with cadence and pacing, is Adam West.
Okay.
But not in a jokey way, because if you kind of look at a lot of those lines in that show, and then you look at the lines as they're spoken in the comics, it's a man working stuff out in his head, and I think, and yes, at a very sort of bang bang pace, especially in the comics, not so much in the show. And it's weird how when you listen to those voice that the voice of Adam West, and it also makes me think of Shatner, although Shatner's not the voice I hear. But the reason is Adam West had a very halting kind of style, like he would stop every few seconds, and Shatner did the same thing for Captain Kirk. And a few years ago, Shatner revealed why he did that. And apparently it was because he was learning the lines the night before. So he had to take a beat to remember what the next line was. And I wonder if Adam West had the same problem. Although it's worth noticing that Burt Ward never had a problem. He just rapped that off. But increasingly, it's Adam West. And when I listen to the one I do find interesting, the voice that does always come to me that is bizarre is whenever I'm reading anything with Ra's al Ghul in, I hear James Mason. And I think that's because of Disney's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Because in that, Mason is essentially an eco-terrorist, and that's what. And I think it's just my brain being a basic bitch and going eco-terrorist.
Oh, I mean, there's lots of that when we pick out certain characters. There's absolutely, like for me, for Batman, I always hear. It was mainly the animated series. It was Kevin Conroy. Yeah. And
which for so many people is the voice.
I think it just lives rent free in my head. Although bizarrely, on these two stories, it doesn't. But I'll get into the voice I do hear on these ones. Okay. But for most of the time, I think the established Batman, the way he, like you say, the way he delivered the lines, it's almost like Batman was his real voice, and Bruce Wayne was like the voice he was putting on, like making it softer and what have you. It's just absolutely amazing.
What's that great thing in Morrison's run, where there's a moment where Alfred says to him, "Oh, by the way, that gravelly voice you do whenever you're Batman, I've noticed you're doing it all the time now, sir." It's just like, which is the clue that the personality's kind of taken over. So for me, it's probably Adam West. For you, Kevin Conroy. In fact, next time I read a modern Batman comic, I'm just going to try and do it in Adam West's voice. See if it holds up. Right, so Detective 27 and Year Zero, Batman Year Zero, or 0 Year. I'm sorry, it's not
0 Year.
0 Year. I always make that mistake. Detective 27. Was this your first time reading it?
I'm pretty sure I had read it before. but I could not remember anything about it. I think in my head, I've literally written down notes, and it was saying, "Does Batman have a gun?" Maybe.
I think that,
and I think that's later. I definitely seen him with a gun, kicking Joker out of a plane or something. He likes to kick people, this Batman. But also the other sort of preconception was, this is 85, 86 years old. Is this going to be horribly dated? Because I've read a few other, I've tried to get into certain, would it be Silver Age when it's, back in the 60s?
Well, Batman would be the Golden Age, because the Silver Age started. I believe that the start of the Silver Age is widely classed to be the very first Marvel comics.
Right, okay.
So 62, 63, something like that, or 61 maybe. And then, so the Golden Age would be Superman, then Batman. So I think it's Superman first, then Batman. But it's a strange read, Detective 27. Like, looking back now on our, from all the years that we've been reading comics and the age that we were when we started things, because there's nothing in that says to me, oh, this is going to become the greatest character ever created.
I mean, look, it's an enjoyable 8-page romp.
Yeah.
But it's, well, I'll go into like the context afterwards, but reading it of itself, like, you're right, there's nothing there that would make you think, right, this is going to capture the imagination. This is going to have 1,000 issues or 2,000, however many 1,000 issues it's got now.
I think if you count every kind of one shot and miniseries, it's probably closer to 2,500 comics, maybe more, maybe slightly less, but I imagine it's probably closer to that. But 1,000 issues of Detective, and have they done 1,000 issues of Batman yet? It's
no, but I'm sure they'll accelerate soon, won't they? They'll start doing it weekly once they've got rid of.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see about that. We've got the new Batman #1 coming later this year, so that'll be kind of an interesting thing. Haven't had one of those in 5 years.
I was going to say, he's very much just a Batman in this. There's no reason given why he's dressed like this. He just, I'm Batman.
I think that's fairly standard for comics. One thing I always notice with comics is that you're very rarely given the hero's origin in the first issue. They all start, and this is a perfect example of how comics are done now, which is so weird how that storytelling is carried on. It starts in media res. You're in the middle of a story, even though it's not an attention grabber at the beginning, because it's two men sitting around smoking pipes.
Right, so going back to Batman voices, in this moment, honestly, I know it's in America, but I'm just thinking Harry Enfield, Paul Whitehouse doing really well. So, Commissioner Gordon, what are you up to today? It's the real quaint, bizarre.
Which
I'm also actually on the lookout for his net wealth as I'm reading these stories, and in this one, he's not referred to as a millionaire or billionaire. He's only, I think, a socialite.
Yeah,
so we've not put a number on his wealth, but we know he's from a family with means and money. Yeah. But
so they back then you would have been looking at people with generational wealth. I'm not sure if I think it would probably have been very uncouth to say how much money you had. In those times, it just would not have been done. It's interesting to see. Like, I think fiction has a problem with billionaires, and society has a problem with billionaires and millionaires and rich people, because we're endlessly fascinated by them, and I don't know why. And yes, I mean, he is Batman is like the myth of the good billionaire, and it's why I like him being rich, because it helps me to believe that yes, someone with that extortionate amount of wealth could be a decent human being, which so far hasn't really been the case.
Well, I'll dive into it more.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll go and actually do research on this for other weeks. But I did a quick, because I was just trying to work out. The extent of my research was socialite into Google search, right? But it wasn't giving me X amount. But I looked into billionaires, and I think Rockefeller was actually the first billionaire around 1916. So it's not a modern.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. I didn't know.
I was fascinated by that. Now I've not. Again, that's Wikipedia. I've not researched it further, so that's bad research. But even at this time, people with insane wealth exist, and to my mind, I don't think your Tony Starks, your Ollie, what's his name? Green Arrow.
Oliver Queen,
Queen, and Bruce Wayne. I don't think they were referred to as billionaires when I was growing up. I think they were always millionaires. Yeah. But I'm definitely, that's why I'm on a wealth watch when we look at these comics, because I want to see the moment he becomes just a millionaire, becomes a billionaire. Because a billionaire back then is like Rockefeller, who made his money in oil, and I think his children would have built the 30 Rock building, 30 Rockefeller Plaza. So I find, and they were known for philanthropy. Yeah, which is interesting. So the good billionaire exists. Now, I don't know how much of that is positive PR and how much is.
I don't doubt that there were good things being done by ultra rich people. I still think most of those problems could be solved by taxation, but.
Is this you pitching Bruce Wayne versus the IRS?
Yeah. Well, there's an interesting thing of how he makes his money, because I think it's only later on it becomes like a technology company, and you're never really, year one only dives into a tiny amount of it because he starts stealing, technological advancements from Wayne Enterprises to use as Batman. But there's not. I think it's only later, and I think that's a lot is to do with the audience writing letters into Batman comics, going, "Well, where did he get his money? Where did this come from?" And I actually kind of blame the audience a lot for the state of the negative state of a lot of modern comics.
Okay.
Because someone goes, "Well, how did Wolverine get his claws?" Or how did why is he covered in? And it's just like, it doesn't matter, does it? Really? Ultimately, what matters is this is the story. This is the thing being told. He dresses up as a bat because he's dressed up as a bat.
Yeah.
But we have become obsessed with how these things start and what does this thing mean? We've become a culture of where the the kind of almost Easter eggy nature of it is more important than the text itself sometimes. And
I definitely think I was guilty of that when I first read.
Me too.
Year Zero, but I'll get to that. But I think it is definitely a case of, I read comics as a kid, then there was a big lapse until I hit 20 or 18, 19, and I passed a comic book shop in Leeds, and they had this unheard of novel there called Watchmen, and no one had heard of it. I was a punk, I was revolutionary, I was a trailblazer, and you start there, this sort of essentially grim dark satire, and then you just inject Dark Knight Returns, Year One, V for Vendetta, all this serious darker stuff into your veins, and you kind of lose sight of the fun that comics could be. As great as all of those are, and they are great, you kind of start asking those questions of, but what does Wayne Enterprise do? Does he have an app? What is his revenue streams? Is his money all in the stock market? And it's it doesn't matter.
Yeah. But also saying that, you couldn't today write a character that was a billionaire or a millionaire who fights crime or does whatever, or becomes a superhero, puts on a metal suit, becomes a superhero, without having that be a crucial part of the story. Because I think, again, the audience is just a bit too savvy. I don't know. I mean, I'm putting it out there now, and I'm copywriting this idea, so don't bother, folks. I'm going to do a guy that becomes a superhero because he wins the lottery. There you go. That's good. Wins the Euro Millions and thinks, what's the best use for this money? I know. And similarly, like I can't stand a lot of the. One of the good thing about looking at much older comics that predate me ever even starting with comics is that you're not weighed down by the moral ambiguities of, well, why isn't he using his money for social programs? It's like, well, I can give you an answer to that right now if you want, because he's not the fucking government. That's why. And I'm going to assume that Bruce Wayne does pay taxes and does contribute. And in fact, Bruce Wayne does start social programs. There's lots of comic evidence for that.
Yeah. There's plenty of references off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure Tynion, I reckon Chip Zdarsky might have mentioned it. Like, oh yeah, I plow X amount into, Gotham's turned. There'll be a line like, oh, Gotham's turned a corner because I've plowed money into orphanages or something, or homeless shelters. But the Riddler is
and then, this one up. And then comes along a twat dressed as a clown and blows it up. Yeah. So I don't always go for the why doesn't Batman plow all his money into social programs? It's just like he absolutely does.
And also, I think we've seen this kind of. They've tried to take his money away, and I'm not talking about absolute Batman. I'm talking about even like mainline comics. It's like, oh yeah, he no longer has money for however long this writer's arc lasts, but then it magically will get transferred back at the end, and so he can be rich for the next writer. But it's like it makes no material difference to him.
No,
he's still got all his toys somehow.
I find all that entirely pointless. I prefer Bruce Wayne with money. Anyway, so we've got way off base. We've gone into a whole nother.
But you're talking about the sort of moral stuff, and that's fascinating because I don't think this is like more morally superior just because of the way, like I'm jumping a bit to the end here, but so I always grew up with Batman. Like Batman doesn't kill. He's got a high death count. He's got a high death count, but it's usually because someone's about to fall off something. This would be the cliche. He tries to grab them, and they either fall because they just slip, or they'd rather die, so they make themselves slip. But it's like, no, I could have saved you and reformed you in Arkham or something. This is not that. He just plain punches a man into a vat of acid. And there's not even like there's no redeeming line, there's no justification other than, again, in the Harry Enfield voice, it's a fitting end for his time. I love he just gobsmacked at, sure, this guy, he tried to screw other people out of money.
That's the thing. Yes, I mean, he killed people. Or had people killed. That is important to note. But largely, when you come down to it, the crime is one of it's financial crime and it's business crime, which is weirdly a lot of what these comics from the Golden Age are about. They're all like businessmen ripping off, and it's just like there's a lot of that around. There's a lot of dodgy businessmen. But yeah, he does, as you point out, just push someone into a vat of acid, which I feel is partly where, when you start looking at things like The Killing Joke much later on, which is a show, by the way, folks, we are planning to do as a Patreon special. So more on that later when we get there. I feel that kind of was Alan Moore trying to address the fact that in those early days he was actually a kind of a bit of a murderer, And as you mentioned, as we talked about in this kind of preamble, he has at some stage he is running around firing guns, which now would not sit with Batman at all. But it's strange because when you look at Batman, it's like, oh yeah, no guns, but every other weapon possible, including some that haven't been invented yet, folks, because I've patented them. Like, any other weapon permissible, but no guns. No guns. And it's I don't know where you draw the line on that, because logistically the whole no kill thing is, I feel it's almost unrealistic, because of course the most logical thing with the Joker is, yes, of course you should kill him. Of course.
That's what makes him better than us, Paul. That's why Bruce Wayne is better than us.
I don't know. I mean, it is an illogical thing, but it's just like, yeah, if you were a police officer, they would have put a bullet in his head by now. They would have just shot him. Because
I think it comes back to essentially this: what I'm 40 something now. I'm still reading Batman, but at some point I was the actual target audience for this, and it made the most complete sense because he was good, and of course he would.
No, totally.
And I think it's sort of just that instilling of, be the best man you can, even if that is a Batman. And I think that's, it's that positive message. He's definitely good. He's not. And I think it only doesn't make sense as you get older, but there's lots of moments.
I mean, I think we all become slightly more conservative, or in some cases, very extremely, staggeringly conservative, or as we like to call it, right wing, as we get older. And I mean, I can certainly, I've kind of a bit of both. Like, so there are a lot of things that societally I've become more conservative about. And I do put that down to being older, but also I do put it down to, actually, you know what, I think this is, what this person's doing or what these people are doing is actually quite destructive to the core fabric of day-to-day life. And then there's some things where I've become a lot more kind of relaxed and lefty about. And, I'm sort of centre left, I would say, politically. Okay. And I think, comics are political because they are a representation of the times they're made in, as all art is. Whether or not they're intentionally political, I think it can be argued as much as you want. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily. I'm not one of those people that says, "Oh, keep politics out of comics." I'm like, no, go on, bring politics in. I'm more than happy with that.
I don't know. I think politics has always been there. I mean, I'm not sure what the politics of this one is, other than people that rip off rich people deserve to be dunked in acid. I think that's
the again. At that time, I imagine that man would have been facing the death penalty anyway.
Right.
Given.
I mean, he does try and gas in a sort of homemade gas chamber.
Yeah.
Another socialite or businessman and Batman. And it's only because Batman has a wrench that he manages to escape.
What kind of made me die about that was this is normally we use this for guinea pigs, and it's enormous. It's just like, how many guinea pigs are you gassing in one go, you evil bastard?
I mean, there are more questions than answers posed by the size of that gas chamber.
Yeah. It's just like,
because in my mind, I mean, maybe it's just the art, but it feels like, I thought it was in someone's living room. Was it a laboratory? But it feels
it's like a lab, right? And it sort of feels we really should have downloaded some more images for this and gotten it up. Sorry, folks, we will have some images of Batman 0 Year, but we don't have a ton of images for Detective 27 because we're very, very unprepared, and this is just a pilot show. But it's there is a sort of weird sense about it. Like I say, like it doesn't really lean into, yeah, this is going to be the greatest character of all time. But I don't think any comic back then, I don't think they were looking at longevity in those terms. They weren't thinking, oh, well, I can take this and I'll build, this will be the cornerstone upon which I build an empire.
Wow. I thought that.
Go on. Right.
And then I was reading this in I think it was the DC app, and it just ended on 8 pages. I was like, well, hold on. The cover promised me 64. Where's the rest of this stuff? So I went looking because I felt like I needed the context, because I think this one ends literally with just 2 panels of, and little did Commissioner Gordon know, where his socialite friend is Batman, and you just saw Batman appears in a doorway, which incidentally is how they recently revealed who the new Venom was. So even almost 100 years on, that's still a trope that works.
Yeah. As I understand, that's nobody's favourite storyline.
I just don't understand why you would spoil that for your own readers. That just beggars belief for me. Like, because I do not understand why you.
They want to guarantee that you'll pick up the comic. We should say, folks, recently, in kind of relation to when we're recording this podcast, because we're recording way ahead of time. We're not going to be putting the show out until we've recorded all episodes, just to make sure that you guys do get the podcast every week. So until we've done those 13 weeks, so we are going to be talking about some comics that are new to us now, but will be old hat to you by the time you
either that or Venom just lives rent free in my head.
Yeah.
At least it wasn't Paul. That's all I'm saying.
I'd love that. I'd have loved that. I'm the world's biggest Zeb Wells apologist. Right. Yeah, I mean...
Yes, right. The other 64 pages.
The other 64 pages. Right, go on. So I know you're dying to talk about this.
Right. Yeah. So in the content, once you've read the other 64 pages, I feel like this Batman story makes complete sense why this would have taken off, because you've got, like, I think his name's Buck Marshall, the cowboy detective in the Wild West, and it's just a detective in the Wild West. You got the Crimson Avenger, who I think we discussed beforehand, who, you know, is a guy just in a mask with guns.
Quasi spirit-esque type character, really.
Yeah. You've got Dr. Fu Manchu story.
I'm just looking up when the Spirit first started, because it'd be interesting to see if they. Hammond's gone.
I'm still here. I think Paul's gone.
Hello, sorry, we temporarily lost everyone there, folks. Sorry, it's just my shoddy internet, and I apologise.
I think it's probably because I mentioned Fu Manchu. It probably just like.
Well, we didn't even get that far. I wouldn't have heard that. So yeah, the other stories, as you say, Crimson Avenger, Fu Manchu. What was the name? Buck
Marshall. Buck Marshall. Slam Bradley's there.
Slam Bradley is there, and Slam Bradley does make it many years later back into Detective Comics, and it has been reused many times by various comic creators, which I am glad of, because I think Slam Bradley is a good character, but I can't say whether or not he's a good character because of the way people have written him later, or because of the way he starts. I think all those detectives are exactly the same. Like all those other things, they're exactly the same, and a lot of them even look the same. But they've all got a gimmick. So Buck Marshall is, he's a cowboy. He's in the Wild West. Slam Bradley's thing is that he hits people very hard.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this one starts off, he pulls someone over, beats them up, and then someone else says, "Oh, I don't know if you realise, but you're a hero because that guy was bad."
Yeah.
And I sort of left under the impression that Slam Bradley had no idea. He just pulled over someone randomly, gave them a kick in, and it just turned out it worked out for him.
The defence of all American policemen. I just pulled him over, Your Honour, and gave him a kick in on the off chance that he might have been. But so I mean, you feel that the kind of USP of Batman makes him sufficiently kind of different to.
I think it's really different. I think it really is different. I mean, the last one that really stood out to me was Speed Saunders, Ace Investigator,
right?
With on the trail of the killers of Kurdistan, which, I mean, my background is I'm half Kurdish, so I suddenly understand representation. Like, this is the first time, I've looked at something and, oh my god, like part of my heritage is being referred to in a comic book. This is mad. I think I've only seen it before in like maybe a Jamie Delano Constantine comic or something.
Not in a positive.
It's a racial stereotype.
Yeah,
it's a racial stereotype, and it's there for alliteration. But in that split second, I felt seen.
Seen by who? When you say seen, do you mean wanted by the police?
Yeah,
like I'm really.
It's just so rare for like your niche,
absolutely, yeah,
like heritage to be referenced. So whenever people get upset about, oh, I don't know, Miss Marvel's a Muslim, or oh, they've got a black Batman or something. In this split second, even though it's bad representation, I had that sense of and so I understand that sort of joy of what someone from a different background, race, sexuality, seeing something in comics means when it comes, which is bizarre looking at a comic from almost 90 years ago.
I didn't think of that actually. It's because I mean I'm white Irish, so overrepresented in fiction, I would say, especially in this type of detective police fiction. There's a lot of us about, so it's not a problem I'm ever going to encounter. I used to work with someone who used to crack a joke sometimes, where they used to go, whenever something was a bit like stupid or a bit illogical, they used to go, oh yeah, it's a bit Irish. And I always used to take the opportunity to remind them I was Irish. By birth, not by not by accent, and geographical location. But I am Irish blood, if you like. It's entirely meaningless to me. But it does mean a lot to other, it does mean a lot to other people.
But even me, as a ethnically ambiguous, half white, very white passing guy, like all of a sudden, because normally that would never be referenced, that part of the Middle East. So
no.
And most of this stuff will just be white guy doing stuff. So yeah, it's fascinating
and completely interchangeable for places like Egypt or
they totally get like where the ethnicity of Kurds wrong and stuff. I think they describe as Arabs and stuff, and it's like, all right, fine. This was purely alliteration. You just wanted the Kurdistan killers. I get it.
Yeah,
but.
And also, I mean, as we talked about, it's whilst quite rightly we should all be pointing that stuff out. I think that there's a limit to how hard you can be on, and again, not excusing racism past or present, but there's a limit on how hard you can be on it, because that was just the state of mind of the country at the time. That was the state of mind of the country. You know, unfortunately, and same with England. Fucking massively racist.
Yeah, there's a line in the Fu Manchu that talks about like the yellow peril being a real terrible threat, which just stopped me in my tracks. But
and utterly crazy, and all that stuff sometimes becomes like a completely self-fulfilling prophecy. It's just like, if you treat people like absolute dirt, then they're going to become quite disenfranchised and quite angry about that, and quite fucking rightly, and it becomes this kind of thing where it's just like, well, you've made this is what you've made by kind of treating people like this. It's a strange thing, and it was quite difficult to get into in the medium of comics. I find. I mean, there are, people are a lot more well informed than I am, and a lot more educated than I am. Who'd be able to do that. I necessarily can't. I mean, you know it when you see it. It's like, oh yeah, that's probably wrong. But
I do find it fascinating looking at this stuff. Like, my only thing before I tried to read, I guess, like the original Fantastic Four and X-Men and what have you. And it's just like how the female characters are written. So much of it is like, I feel like Sue Storm is so ever all powerful now because of the short shrift she was given back then. There's very much, oh, Sue, you're such a girl. Like, and the same with Jean Grey as well, I think.
Yeah.
Absolutely bizarre.
And again, you can look at the clothes the characters were wearing, and like the ultra short skirts and stuff like that, and it's very. I mean, Batman really comes from a time and place where women weren't given a voice at all. I'm trying to think how many sort of female villains there are. I mean, I'm sure there are more in Batman before, but one of the first ones I remember is like Ruby Rider, and there's others, and of course now we have Talia al Ghul and Jezebel Jet and Selena Kyle, and then you have a ton of female villains. But exactly. It's there's just so many female villains now, and I think even now they're not, because there's been this sort of not rush, but because this drive towards rehabilitating the villainy of characters. In a way that gives them as much short shrift, because I would like to see, a real kind of female-led villain series, because when you look at Batman, and you have a lot of those big events where they have all the villains, they're nearly always the male villains, and then there's one or two female villains. But I think there's room for that. So I'm just pitching all my Batman ideas now.
No, that is interesting, because I think apart from Talia al Ghul, the ones off the top of my head, like Selena is like the on again, off again girlfriend, potential wife, love interest, sort of, shades of grey villain. She's got a good heart. Poison Ivy, I've not caught up with. I think people are enjoying that, but
the character's been completely.
That looks like part of the whole sort of Swamp Thing universe at the moment. Like, it looks like she's. I should give that a go, but
it's good.
I don't think she's a villain. Yeah,
definitely.
And like Harley Quinn doesn't seem to be. Is like a whole other thing. Like she's definitely. Is she part of the Bat family? I'm sure I saw her helping out in an issue recently. I don't know.
It's a grey area. As with all those characters, it's become like this sort of total grey area. But I mean, like looking at the early stages of Batman, obviously I I can't say with any kind of clarity that I'd still be if I'd started out reading the Golden Age of Batman at any stage. I'm not sure I would still be a reader now. Do you know what I mean? I might have given up on it a long time ago, and it's only in retrospect that I can enjoy kind of going back and looking at some of it. But I don't really have a massive temptation to go right back into the Golden Age stories, even though the modern.
I'd be tempted if people wanted to pick certain things out, because I'm sure there are gems there. There has to be,
absolutely.
Otherwise, Grant Morrison doesn't plunder all of that history if it's not there,
Well, there's things like the Mad Monk and the Monster Men, both of which have been reused to great effect. By Matt Wagner and by other writers, and even by Darwin Cook for the New Frontier. The Mad Monk makes an appearance there, and there's stuff like that. But yeah, it's a very slight beginning. It's just kind of there. It's no better or worse. I mean, the big difference is he's dressed up as a bat, and even that is only about half the comic, really. Not even that. And also, you'll notice he doesn't do a massive amount of the detecting.
No,
the world's greatest detective
very
does
much handed to him this case.
Yeah.
So not much detecting. I am weary that we might have spent 45 minutes on 8 pages, and we've got a 12-issue run.
Okay, let's try and get through that in the next 40 minutes. Let's try and that's another thing, folks. We don't know how long these episodes are going to end up being. So if you want to go and make yourself a little cup of tea, you can do that. So jumping forward to 2011 now, all the way from like 1939 to 2011, we've got. Or actually, this probably would have been around 2012, I think, because by then they would have been well into the New 52 run. So the new origin of Batman didn't take place until sort of it was like the second or third arc of Scott Snyder's.
I think it's the third or fourth trade.
Yeah, and it goes across like 2 or 3 trades, because we have 0 Year is split
21.
Sorry,
issue 21 is where it starts, and it runs.
That's crazy. It's crazy. Now, my understanding from this is that Scott Snyder didn't want to do a Batman origin, because he just basically picked up the reins from whatever had gone before, and they reset what they needed to reset, and just carried on with what they needed to carry on with. And it's quite an odd one. My feelings around the New 52 are very mixed, because at the time I had made my re-interest in Batman had kind of started because I was on Wednesdays. I was hanging out with a friend of mine who had said, "Oh, look, Grant Morrison's going to be coming on to Batman," and I was like, "Well, really, like Grant Morrison?" And he was like, "Yeah, Grant Morrison's going to be doing Batman," and I was like, "Oh, I'll start reading it now," which was some Paul Dini stuff leading into that, and then Batman R.I.P. happened, which was murder to read every week. Great as a trade.
Well, I
read every week.
Here's the thing: unlike you, I was definitely a trade collector.
Right.
I've only recently seen actually how all that stuff was published, and my God, like I think it would be like 3 Grant Morrison issues, and then all kinds of different writers writing things.
Yeah,
and then Grant would appear again somewhere.
And to be fair, the other writers they had on, it was Paul Dini, but what had happened was I'd made this kind of in about 2006, 2007. I'd gone, you know what? I used to love Batman comics when I was like 12 or 13, and Batman. I remember the Batman movie was coming out, and I got really into it around 1989, and I'm just going to go and get every Batman comic I can from that period right up to now. And I did. And eventually I when Dark Knight Rises was coming out, I had literally just finished buying it all. It was mad because now I'm in the process of getting rid of it all. So it's just, and replacing it with trades. And I think at the time when they started the New 52, I was really pissed off because it's just like I've just spent all this money and all this time and effort and energy and love and care reading this stuff and getting into it again. And now what you're telling me is you're going to wipe all that off the board and restart the whole universe. And I was furious. And that did carry over into my reading it. I liked
I had the opposite. Because I think I remember you just staring at me in must have been in FOP, where we once worked.
Yes.
On a lunch table, I think I'd gone out and got Action Comics by Grant Morrison, and I read those 20 pages in about 2 seconds because that's the modern comic experience.
Yeah.
I was like, that's it. But it got me, buying monthly comics at that point.
Yeah.
It was a great jumping on point.
I'm a lot more. I'm kind of a lot more. As I've said, you learn to relax about other things, and you learn to be less impassioned and just let people enjoy what they want to enjoy.
Mm.
I'm now going back to a lot of the New 52 stuff to kind of, re-examine it. Grant Morrison's Superman's on the list, and but the Batman stuff I read at the time. I have a lot of mixed feelings about the origin. It gets 0 Year gets better as I go back to it. It does get better, but at the time it wasn't my favorite, and it's nothing to do necessarily with the quality of the writing. I think it was just, look, there's one origin for Batman as far as I'm concerned, and that was done by Frank Miller and Dave Mazzucchelli, and I'm not interested in anything else. But I realise that that's a stupid view.
No, I completely sympathise with that, because when you said, right, let's do Scott Snyder for the beginnings, I was like, yeah, cool, Court of Owls is great. And then you said 0 Year, and I was thinking,
because that's his origin. Yeah,
I know, but I'm thinking, what are you thinking? Because like you, I was like, no, the origin is Year One, and I remember at the time reading it. Court of Owls is great. Then it's followed up by a Joker story that I didn't love, but it was still, I think, just mad. I think, cut off faces left, right, and center. Right. And it felt like it was building momentum. And then suddenly it comes to this screeching halt, and it's like, okay, for the next year we're doing a flashback, and it starts with like a post-apocalyptic thing. I'm like, what the hell am I reading? And that all comes from like a weird snobbery, because I'm happy. Like, I really wasn't looking forward to rereading this because I thought this was where the run starts to dip in quality. But I disagree with younger Hammond completely. I think this is brilliant.
I think later on, like the Doctor Death stuff, the Doctor, the Carl Halfron stuff is the stuff where I'm a bit, I'm not sure about this. But I find it difficult to put my finger on what about that bothers me. But I like the initial concept. I love this idea that he effectively, is declared dead, which I know is something they kind of did in Batman Begins, and I love the idea that he doesn't want to come back to Gotham and be known. Like, he wants to kind of just sort of be underground, and that the Bat thing isn't solidified in that first issue.
Oh yeah, Batman doesn't appear until
like the second arc, I think it is. So I kind of like that stuff. The introduction of the Canes is quite an interesting kind of thing. I know that was probably done to set up Batwoman a bit later on, again, which was a fantastic run. But it speaks of the time it's in, and I think Snyder was ahead of the game on a lot of stuff, because if you look at it, it's about a cult that is kind of, unlike a lot of other cults, isn't joined by choice. You're just kind of forced into it. And I feel that a lot of that is quite prevalent today. And again, not to take away the choices that people make, which especially today I find really mystifying and unfortunate. But he was kind of speaking about a lot of stuff that was kind of in the air at the time. And I quite like that. And it becomes, I like the use of anarchy as a disguise for a kind of organized. It's not even organized crime, really. It's terrorism. And I know that's. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say it's fascinating. You said that's the Red Hood gang you're talking about.
Yeah. Sorry.
I think it's fascinating that 10 years later or 12 years later, with Absolute Batman just having launched, it feels like I didn't realise at the time, but he's gone back to that idea, but turned it up to 11 with the sort of party animals, again with red masks, doing terrorism for money. But it's fascinating that this clearly, there's something there that's clearly eating away at him as like fertile ground to explore in these comics. And I mean, you were saying you found certain bits difficult, or not difficult, but you weren't so sure of them, whether it be Dr. Death or what have you.
Yeah, I think that part, although I like the kind of basis, I like the pop, the where that starts from. I always kind of just didn't feel part of the whole for me, because of where it starts. You're right in the middle of this impending apocalypse, and it's just like no one's got.
Which is only about 3 or 4 issues of this 12 issue. There's a lot of Shawshank before you get to the redemption in this one. There's a lot. But I think, to be honest, there's definitely a moment in this comic where I stopped caring about worrying about XYZ, and I think he pulls so many, and it's great art from is it Greg Capullo? Yeah, great art. Just I'm amazed this was this coming out without delays. Like this is.
I think so. Yeah, I think they were fairly on time with it.
It's incredible art, and there's definitely a moment where they sort of, you've got this build up, and they literally just throw everything at it. Like every other page feels like a splash page, and it's a different homage to a different era of Batman. So you've got that moment.
Let's have a look at some.
Yeah, go for it.
I've got some of it here. I mean, they redo the kind of Red Hood versus Batman at the Ace chemical plant and the birth. Well, we don't know if it's the birth of Joker at the time, but we're pretty sure it's going to be. Yeah. And that's all sort of fantastically well done. I mean, that's it. It's a great sequence. I had zero problems with that stuff. I think action-wise, he kind of was very much doing modern cinematic kind of big scale.
This without doubt is blockbuster comics. This is like whenever I see people bad mouthing online, the Ultimates from early 2000s.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty sure they're just bad mouthing Mark Miller, because if you're criticizing the Brian Hitch artwork, even the Mark Miller writing, like I'm not his biggest fan, but at that period, like the Authority and Ultimates, it was called widescreen comics, basically, isn't it? It's still, even looking at it now, it's there's just like a pace to it, which I think this comic has. It definitely feels like
And
it feels like I'm reading a movie that they haven't made yet.
Yeah, completely. And it had a lot of kind of symmetry with the Christopher Nolan movies that were coming out at the time. Although I would say that the movies were my preferred media for Batman at the time. And I think the part of the problem with a lot of stuff now is, and a lot of comics now is that every mainstream superhero comic has got to be a blockbuster comic, and what has been lost and was kind of being, you know, the final nail in its coffin was the New 52, was the single issue detective story that had been done brilliantly in the kind of late 80s and 90s. Normally drawn by Norm Breyfogle and written by Wagner and Grant, and that stuff has now been completely decimated, and that's gone. That is just gone from comics now, and especially gone from Batman comics. And this is what's replaced it. And you can only look at Tynion's run, which was perfectly serviceable and perfectly enjoyable, and you can see that is dead. And now every issue has to be a major statement, a major action piece, a major thing. And I actually would, it's just like, please just give me a bit of a break where it just quiets down for a bit and you just do a one and done story or a bunch of one and done stories. And I think this was kind of, I couldn't define it at the time, and I think this was feeding into that for me.
Okay.
And so I was like, oh, no, I don't want this. Get rid of it. You know. But I do like the stuff they brought to it in terms of, you know, I think it's an interesting take on the Riddler.
This Riddler, I thought of him as sort of Mark Zuckerberg as business consultant turned terrorist. Like,
yeah,
there's a real nerd about him. Like, if I was in the same room as him, I would be confident that me, a non-violent, non-Batman person, could beat the crap out of him. However, by the end of this story, he is terrifying in just really weird ways. Just the absolute madness he's inflicting on Gotham for, I don't think there's any reason. He just wants to be the smartest guy in the room. There's no reason for him doing this other than
there's no financial motive.
No.
In it.
But I do love, there's a moment where I think it's, you know, like his finale with Batman is almost like a game show where he's making Bruce answer riddles to be able to stop the bombs and the planes going off, etc. And I think you turn the page and it's got like, you know, he starts his quiz basically with "Riddle me this, Batman," which I'm pretty sure is like a callback to those Adam West TV shows. There's stuff in here there's so much stuff in here that is definitely influenced by the recent Nolan films, which must have just finished by then. There's stuff in here.
Yeah, I think they were coming to. So Dark Knight Rises was 2012.
Right.
Batman Begins was 2005. 2008 was Dark Knight, and then Rises was 2012. So it would have been kind of synonymous. It would have been kind of in synchronization with that.
But you've got the blimps and sort of the Art Deco blimps flying in the early parts of the story, which to me screams the animated series. You've got, I mean, you've even got a goddamn Batman reference at one point. It literally is touching on all elements of Batman.
I think that's one thing that he's very good at, Snyder, is taking, and I think it's something he does again with Absolute Batman, which is he takes everything and sort of sucks it up and then spits it back out, but in an interesting way. And I found myself quite enjoying those little beats and moments. I like the kind of, you know, he brought in a very testy relationship with Alfred. which went beyond kind of exchanging barbs and banter, and was in fact a kind of ideologically opposed relationship. And I don't, the relationship they don't really flesh out until too close to the end is Gordon.
Oh, I mean, this, I don't know if I just got sucked into the story, but there's at least 3 moments where Snyder did some storytelling and I fell for it hook, line and sinker. There's a moment where I think Lucius Fox injects Bruce with a serum with Dr. Death behind. I think that's only one issue, and I'm like, oh my god, they've turned Lucius Fox into a villain. Like that's the first instinct, because that's what the panel tells me. You know, a few pages later, it's like, oh no, I had to inject you with a vaccine, but I didn't have enough time because I knew he was around. I'm like, okay, fine. Second, you've got Jim Gordon, and I'm sitting there thinking, wow, this is a fascinating take on the relationship. Like, Bruce does not trust Jim Gordon at all. Jim Gordon's on the take. What if they? And I'm thinking, oh, Scott Snyder, he does love Frank Miller, and Frank Miller did the whole stuff with Jim Gordon having an affair, and like that's the first time I was disappointed in Jim Gordon.
I'm
curious. Sorry.
If you really want to be disappointed in Jim Gordon, have you ever read Batman Earth 1?
Earth 1? Ooh,
yeah.
I'm not sure.
You might find yourself very disappointed in Jim Gordon in the first volume of that.
But then, of course, obviously, Jim tells his story to Batman and us, the reader, and we understand that, no, Jim is a good man. It's fine. And then, you know, in the final moments of this story, you've got Alfred wanting to introduce Bruce to, I don't know what her name is, Julie or something, you know, a woman from his past. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, I don't remember her from the rest of the arc. And you've got these pages, and then suddenly it all fades away, and that's just Alfred's imagination, literally just taking the ending from Dark Knight Rises and putting it on the page. And I literally sat there like Aaron Paul, like, he can't keep getting away with this.
Is it Julie?
Bad, because I just got sucked in each time to something that, if I logically thought about it, these 3 things aren't happening.
Yeah. Is it Julie Madison he tries to introduce him to?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. So she's quite an important figure from the sort of Batman history, and has been kind of used and reused quite extensively.
Okay.
And it was like the one-time greatest love of his life. She sort of predates Selena Kyle, and you know, the relationship fails, I think, because her father is involved in criminality, and that eventually kind of drives them apart. But yeah, there is stuff in there. I think he kind of occupies like these weird spaces in his Batman stuff where they become quite fantastical. I mean, it's comics, but they become quite fantastical. You can only look at things like Last Night on Earth, and which I think is supposed to be the overriding end to his Batman run. And in a way, I wonder how much of it he's going to redo again with this character in Absolute Batman. I mean, at the time, folks, we've been planning this podcast for so long and talking about doing it for so long. At the time, it wasn't even announced.
When you told me to read this, I did, and I enjoyed it so much. I ordered the Absolute version of it, which is only going to come out next week or something. So that's a good 6 months. You know, the lead time on this, 6-9 months maybe. In that time, Absolute Batman's come out and had a first arc.
Yeah. and we're getting a new Batman #1 in a few months. So yeah.
The bizarre thing is, one of the notes I wrote while reading this was, this is Ultimate Batman. And this is before Absolute Batman was on the shelves.
Yeah.
That I made that note. And all we had was just a hench Batman. We didn't know what was coming with that.
Mm.
And what I meant by Ultimate Batman is kind of like the way Bendis wrote his Ultimate Spider-Man back in the early 2000s. Like, just took what was there and just updated it. Like, it's not a radical reinvention. It's just bringing it up to date. And that's kind of what this felt like. Like, rather than being, you know how Absolute Batman literally subverts everything. This doesn't actually change that much, but it's refreshed enough. And actually, I think the cleverest thing he does was the thing I hated the first time I read it. But now in retrospect, I think it's genius in that I didn't like the idea of post-apocalyptic Gotham when I first read it. Like, I don't care for this story before I got there. The second time, I'm like, it makes so much sense to, the Batman we really love being written by people like Frank Miller. I think he's always said, he was asked, oh, how did you come up with like the scenes for Daredevil and Batman? And he always said, well, I just looked out of my apartment into like 70s, 80s New York or something. Now I've been to New York now. It's lovely. It's whatever Frank Miller experienced is not what exists now. And so I think that New York analog doesn't work anymore. And what Snyder has done is say, well, how do we get from a normal city that's got a normal level of corruption or a slightly heightened level of crime and make it full lunatic asylum that we're used to Batman running around? And it's, let's blow it up. Let's blow the city, literally blow the city up and cut it off from the rest of America and launch it into a full crisis.
Which has been done before in Batman.
Sure.
It's something that has gone before in Batman. No Man's Land in particular. It's a strange one because I find Batman becoming almost very Tony Stark-esque in this. And by then, I think Iron Man had kind of re-entered the popular pop culture consciousness. So they almost would have had to do it. And also because, the one thing billionaires seem to do is get technology and be complete fucking idiots with it. And I actually find overall the story and the tone of this to be quite positive. It's not necessarily fun in the way that something like Wade and Dan Mora's World's Finest is fun. But I think it is. I
agree. It's not fun the way that Wade would do fun.
Yeah,
this is a lot more fun than most.
Yeah,
I think there's a smirk as they're doing it. There's that moment where, when we first see Batman, he's literally recreating the image from Detective Comics 27, where he just grabs a goon, and it's sort of, in my head, he screams at him, "I need a head for a bat," because he's making a bat symbol out of criminals. Like, that's hysterical. Like, that's not straight face. This is serious comics. This is two guys having a lot of fun with one comic.
Yeah, and also I think it's interesting to compare how many scenes and big action scenes in this take place in the daylight.
Yeah, that's a good shout.
It's not the nighttime Gotham that we're used to. It's all done in daylight, and a staggering amount. Even once he becomes Batman, it's still in the daylight.
He fights lions. He fights lions.
I always like to think that was a nod to Welcome Back Frank, Garth Ennis's Punisher.
I do think part of that is, I think we're first introduced to Bruce in a mask, but it's just a person mask. It's getting us used to the idea of he's playing with disguises. I don't think Matches Malone is ever referenced, but it's both that and look, this guy's going to become Batman because he's just looking for the right disguise. I think he even disguises himself as the Penguin at one point, which is kind of ludicrous if you think about it. But anyway, you go with it. But I love how unrefined he is. how angry and reckless. Like I think when he escapes from driving a truck off a multi-story car park or something into the river to save people, his first action is to, stick a finger up at the Red Hood.
Yeah.
Like this is a really angry young Batman. He doesn't know what he's doing. He jumps off the handle at Commissioner Gordon. Like he's already judged him. He's not looked into it properly. I think like the Kevin Conroy voice does not work with this version of Bruce. He's too young. He's angry.
No,
and I think that feeds into. He fights a lot in the daylight. He becomes this symbol, but I think this story tells him he doesn't have the advantages doing this like that.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that's interesting is that it is kind of he starts off being the angry young man and then becomes the soldier. And you see that in the sort of shaved head and that stuff in the middle chapter where he becomes Batman. It's just like, oh yeah, now it's a military, and that's the one thing you've got to look at now. If you created Batman now, it would be a military incursion using asymmetrical warfare.
Yeah,
and that's just what it would be. And it would be a kind of, he would be the terrorist, and. That's what he is. He is the terrorist. Because all these systems that he's fighting, the corruption and all things like that, are established, accepted systems. They're completely part of the fabric of society. Looking at it now, if you want to get political about it, I think there probably needs to be a Batman now, a sort of anti-billionaire Batman.
But who's Batman's target? Other billionaires? Because I guess I feel like Chip Zdarsky maybe more of his Daredevil than what he achieved with Batman. But I definitely think he was asking the question, "What are we doing here? Beating up like street level people?" And I think that also feeds into the other problem you identified of like bigger and bigger sort of event type things. Like there isn't a small crime. Because essentially it would just be one arguably mentally ill man in a bat costume beating on other mentally ill people in other costumes.
I mean, look, I've grown up around a lot of criminality in my life, and I can tell you that mentally ill, yes, but also a lot of criminals really fucking enjoy being criminals. So I'm not always a proponent.
Is that your Michael Caine moment? Where you
no, but they do really enjoy, like a lot of the criminals I've encountered when I was younger, just because of the situation I grew up in. And yes, poverty plays a part, mental illness plays a part, but also there is a pleasure in it, and
I think, Absolute Batman is, I'm sure, something we'll touch on another time, but I definitely feel like Snyder's definitely tapped into those things. I definitely think this is the kind of Snyder I enjoy more.
Yeah.
Like some Court of Owls and Absolute Batman, as they've got ridiculous moments, but they're not that grounded, but they feel like more personal. Like the best moment of this comic for me is you don't see the damn like death of the Waynes until a certain point in the story.
Yeah.
And it has this synergy of his most traumatic moment, the defining thing that's turned him into this, you see played out with his first big failure as Batman when he doesn't stop the Riddler from destroying it. And it's like, that's a scene you've seen so many times and you'd hope never to see it again. And yet twice in this last year, I've read 2 Scott Snyder books where he's made me relive that trauma with 2 different Bruce Waynes, and he's nailed it both times.
Yeah. And also, I have a real. It's as you say. It's interesting that you point out the defining moment, because it is the defining moment. And I have a real problem with people who keep going, I don't want to see those pearls hitting the pavement again. So, oh, don't you? Oh, well, you're obviously not in the mood for Batman then, because that is part of, that is the, it's like, and I would say
the pearls in slow motion again.
Yeah, but look, it is the defining thing, and it's much more of a defining thing than Peter Parker getting bitten by a spider. Because really,
the thing is his uncle dying.
Yeah, well, and in fact, I would go even further and say the defining moment of Peter Parker is with great power becomes great responsibility. But this is the defining moment in Batman, and if you can't stand
his marriage,
yeah. Well, let's not get into that minefield.
That's a whole different podcast.
You know, maybe you're just not into Batman. Which is fine, you know. I'm not, but it is just. I don't think there's anything wrong with showing that. And it.
I think the problem is I think it's been done either lazily or it feels too similar, or maybe.
Yeah, and I
think that might be sort of the repetition of it might be a problem. Whereas when you see it done here, I think you already know what's going to happen, but it's played out. That tragedy is played out at the same time. Is in fairness, you know that another tragedy is about to happen because you know that Bruce isn't going to be able to stop the Riddler's plan because we've already seen in the first panel of the book the post-apocalyptic Gotham exists. But there's that childish hope that maybe this time he'll stop it. Like maybe this time he'll manage to stop this murder or whatever, or maybe this time he'll stop this bomb. And I think it's fantastic how it's
that
done.
Is the core thing of all superheroes is maybe this time, you know, maybe this will be different. And again, can you really have a superhero born out of positivity? I don't know. I think they've all kind of got to be born out of something darker. But again, maybe that's for someone else to come along and write. Maybe you know. Oh, I've had a really good life so far.
I'm racking my brain trying to think of
I'm just about to turn 18. The trust fund is going to kick in. I think I'll dress up as, I don't know. Happy Man. I don't think it works. I don't.
Yeah.
Although if you want that, you know, that's what Marvel is. That is what Marvel is. Marvel is the positive kind of superheroes, really. If you look at the colors and the vibrancy of Marvel, that's where that is. You know, even Superman had to have the entire planet destroyed to become what he.
I don't. You actually, you've not read Absolute Superman yet, but
no, not yet. So I've read Absolute Batman, the first arc. Yeah. I'm moving on to the as those other two arcs come to an end. I'll be.
Okay. You were saying earlier, you know, you feel you're sort of more centre left. That book pulls on my Marxist heartstrings. That is like revolutionary comic.
Okay, now I definitely want to read.
Honestly, you're reading it, and I'm like, yeah, there's that and the Ultimates. I think by Marvel. Those two books are literally like Molotov cocktails for the politics of our time in comic form. They're incredible.
Not read the Ultimates yet. I've just finished the first arc of Ultimate Spider-Man. But of course, by the time this goes out, I probably would have caught up fully on the Ultimate Universe, I hope. So 0 Year and Detective 27 are available in one form or another out there in the world. If you want to buy back issues, you can head to thecomiccrush.com. I do Batman back issues, DC back issues, Marvel back issues, all kinds of comics on there. If you want to dive into that. UK only for post. If you want it posted to the US, please do contact me via email and we'll have a conversation. But for me, that's it. I have really enjoyed kind of diving into these. I'm kind of glad we didn't do year one.
Yeah, I mean,
I love it. It is like the thing for me. I think it's probably one of the greatest comics ever made.
It's my favorite. So Year One is my favorite Batman book.
Mm.
Full stop. I mean, I wouldn't have the stupid overpriced versions if I
Yeah,
didn't.
of course.
And it is, I think, the prism I look at a lot, maybe unfairly, but it's the prism I look at a lot of other stories in. And I think it's why the first time I read Zero Year, I even want to call it Year Zero because that's the effect Year One has on you, right? That I think I didn't enjoy Zero Year the first time as much because I'm comparing it to Year One too much. And I think that as well was Scott Snyder's fear, right? That how do I redo almost a perfect beginning?
Yeah.
And I think, they're totally different stories, but I feel like he nailed what they set out to do in this sort of bombastic, different, very different style. Because you're not going to be able to do that whole street level, slow attack on crime that Frank Miller did. This is its own thing, and I think it's glorious. And I think it would be a great. Do you think this would be a good first comic for someone?
Yes, I think you're absolutely fine. I mean, whenever people come in and ask for like, where to start with Spider-Man or Batman, and it's just like, look, it kind of doesn't matter because as long as you know that there's a character called Peter Parker or a character called Bruce Wayne, and you know that this is the definitive trait of Bruce Wayne and this is the definitive trait of Peter Parker, you're kind of fine. Your brain will do the catching up for you, and you'll Google the rest. And that's part of the fun of comics. I don't think it's only like later in life that I found myself reading comics issue 1, 2, 3, 4. You know what I mean? That's something that came late for me. When I used to read comics and I first started reading comics, you'd be picking up issue 137. You didn't know, like you didn't know.
I think one of the first comics I ever picked up was from like this little newsagent on this council estate I grew up on. And it was, I just wanted this issue of Spider-Man. I think it was probably the first Scarlet Spider thing. So I just thought he looked cool because he had a blue hoodie, a blue armless hoodie. I thought, that's cool. That's a cool costume. And I saved up all my pennies. I think it was like 26p or something.
Right.
I bought that. And then, this continued. I think there was 4 Spider-Man comics. And this obviously was crossing over all of them. And the next part would have been in, I know, Web of Spider-Man. But obviously, this newsagent did not have Web of Spider-Man. So I just had one random issue. And that's what reading comics was like as a kid. I've got one random issue here. I've got issue 152 of X-Men. I've got, there's no cohesive story. It's only later in collected versions and having access to more comic shops. I'm like, there's more cohesive stories available.
Yeah, and you can actually you can do it in reverse. You don't have to, you see so much now. Sorry, I'm just messaging my missus to start the dinner. You see so much now where it's, where do I start? Where do I start with this? And it's just like, you know what? Anywhere. Just take the risk. And this is what you don't see now. You don't see risk taking. When I started reading Batman, it was on something like issue 434. Like, I can't even remember. It was so far in, but you didn't think about that when you were a kid. You just, it's just like, this looks good.
I feel like I started on hard mode, but then I think a lot of people did because of the Batman movie and then Arkham Asylum coming out like the same summer or something. So that was like, But after I was saying like Watchmen and this, that, and the other, I'm like, what's this? And I read Arkham Asylum, and I'm like, what the hell is this?
Yeah,
it's fantastic. But I didn't get it first time. It's like, this is nothing. This isn't what I was expecting or prepared for.
You're constantly dealing sometimes with really radically different takes, and I think now we're, when you get to talking about Snyder, you jump into Absolute Batman, you're dealing with a radically different take, and yet we're going to change everything, but still bring you back to a place that and I think that's important. So you will get there, kids. You will get there, no matter what you're reading. You'll figure it out, and you'll you'll find a place that works for you.
What I would say is one of my hopes for doing something like this is I probably started reading Batman probably around the time of like Grant Morrison. So with both, I think X-Men and Batman, Grant Morrison is my in, and then I'm probably up to date from there. But then obviously, if you go backwards, like I don't think I've read some of the great stories here and there, maybe the 70s or what have you. Like, you know, Denny O'Neil is like held up. I don't think I've read a lot of, if any, which will be blasphemy to certain people of a certain age. But I'm here to say, doesn't matter. Like, there's 3,000 comics of Batman. We can't read them all. Yeah. So, what are the recommendations? Let's go read them together. Let's find it out. Because, I see online people saying, "Oh, where do I start?" And it is the same list of, well, it's Year One, it's Dark Knight Returns, it's Last Halloween. It's like, these are all great comics, but where's the variation? It's, I think, when we were younger, it was literally, I got to take a risk and pick this up off the shelf and hope it's good.
I'm gonna really advocate now for at the moment. There's a line of comics coming out from DC called DC Finest, which are designed to run all the way from the golden age right up to 2011. And they're going to pick stories from those different periods. They're going to do them, I think, in order within the volumes and stuff. The first Batman one is out, and that is Year 1 and 2 together. Okay. And there is a sequel to Year 2 called Full Circle, but that's not in this collection because it comes later on in the order. And also there's like a couple of Batman arcs from Batman and Detective in there. Go read those because those are fantastic, and there'll be some good Brofogel stuff. There'll be some good Wagner and Grant stuff, and those are a lot of fun. Or go find a back issue comic shop that has just some random issues of Batman from the 80s in there and grab those, or from the 70s, or from the just try that. Just set it on random. I'm a big fan of continuity, but I'm also a big fan of just being able to grab something and read it and just let your brain do the work and let your imagination do the work to what went before. And eventually you'll find yourself putting them in your own order. And that is fun. I used to spend many a day doing that, like reordering my Batman comics to the order that I think they work best in. But this has been great, man. Hemant, thank you so much for coming up with the idea for this and being patient enough while I eventually got around to doing it. Guys, so on the socials, if you follow us at The Comic Crush, we're going to put up the themes, all the themes. So all the episodes have been done. You've just got to pick the theme for us. If you pick the theme, that'll be the next episode that goes out. This is the only one that kind of goes out in order. The first one is the only one that goes out in order. All the rest will be in the order that you decide. And once that theme's done, it's all done. So I'll put the themes up on socials. We've got all the comics picked out. So you tell us what the next one's going to be, and that's the episode we'll put out. You'll probably see that our hair will be all radically different lengths and things as we go through the various episodes. So yeah, tell us what you think the next theme should be, and I'll be putting all those themes up on socials straight after this episode goes out. Drop us your comments in the comment section on YouTube or on the socials, and then in about 3 episodes time, we'll put out a special sort of replies video where we will address your comments and your questions, and we will try and answer them. And tell us where we're going wrong. Tell us what you think we should be doing, and let us know what we're doing right, if anything. Do follow at The Comic Crush on Twitter. Sorry, not Twitter anymore. On Instagram and Threads. Find The Comic Crush on Facebook and like.
You really are centre left, aren't you? Not Twitter.
I am. I'm killing the Twitter account at some point soon. I'm not using it anymore, but it will be going, and definitely on Blue Sky. So at thecomiccrush.bsky.social. Hemon, can people follow you? Do you want people following you? Is that something you are? Would you rather just not be?
I mean, they can if they want. I mean, it won't be that interesting for them. I just tend to send messages towards Kieran Gillen, Dennis Camp, and Alex Packnow, and sometimes they like a tweet, but often not. I often just retweet just doom scrolled things. So, I mean, if people want to, go for it. Get deep into, and to be honest, I'm very easy to find on any social
because
media.
It's just
game console, and if you want to beat me up at Splatoon on the Nintendo Switch, you could probably find me because I'm going to be Hemon everywhere. Because not many people are named Hemon.
It's very true. Very true.
Very true.
So at Hemon, is it at Hemon Sheffy or just at Hemon?
Honestly, you could just search Hemon and you'll find me. If you
find you'll find him. You can also contact me, Paul, at thecomiccrush.com via email if you don't want your thing to be public. If there's anything you're saying that you're happy to be put out on the podcast, and you just put on it okay to print, and I'll make sure that the readers know who you are. But if there's any information you don't like, your name or whatever, like, make sure you tell me that in the email, because otherwise I will just I might set up some socials just for this podcast. We'll see. But for now, it's all at the Comic Crush. Hemon, thanks so much for coming up with this and doing it. This has been great. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Maybe the next one will be shorter. Maybe it will be longer. We don't know yet.